Thank you very much, Nan. Just as I think it's important to note that much like we look to challenge myths about higher ed, like thinking, like when we say college, people automatically think of a leafy campus and a professor playing a guitar and a quad, and 18 to 21-year-old, when in fact the majority of students are 25 and older, as Jesse mentioned yesterday from Lumina. When we're thinking about helping people choose the right financial fit, oftentimes you might automatically think, oh, well, let's think about how that pertains in a low and middle income student context. You're helping people for whom the risk is greatest to make sound financial choices. But as Manjula, the next panelist will talk about, it's not just low and middle income. There are people across the income spectrum that it's important that we have these kinds of conversations about what constitutes the right financial fit, because even though it may look on paper that you have the resources and the ability to write a check for $50,000, that may not be the case, or that may not be the best decision. And it may be even more particularly challenging in that context in a suburban area where the expectation is you're going to go to these brand name schools to have those kind of conversations about finding the right financial fit. And with that, I'd like to introduce Manjula Karamchetty from Lexington High School. She's the Director of Guidance.
Hi everyone, how you doing? Hanging in there? All right, so I'm going to give you a little background about myself first. My name is Manjula Karamchetty, and I've been a licensed school counselor in Massachusetts for the past 16 years. So I'm sort of going to take my words from the big picture to the work on the ground. I've worked with students and families, again, for about 16 years, and now an administrator in a school district. But I'm going to give you a little history first and tell you a little bit about myself. So I love higher education. I just want you to know that. I love money. I want you to know that too. I want you to know that I have an 11-year-old daughter who wants to study drama at NYU. And I have a son who is 9 and wants to study engineering at UMass Lowell. I'm very excited about my son's plans, less excited about my daughter's plans. And I think that goes back to some of the comments the other panelists have made. This is a really stressful, intense topic for students and families in terms of thinking about how to pay for higher education. So I also want to tell you a little bit about school counselors. They've both been mentioned by both of our panelists as well. So historically, school counselors are trained in counseling, vocations, mental health, and crisis management. I never took a class in college admissions, and I certainly never took a class in financial aid and paying for college. So where you got your college admissions experience was in your internship, wherever you happened to have your practicum. My first job in counseling at Framingham High School, during my first week, I was told, hey, don't worry about financial aid. Don't worry about your family's financial situation. We're not accountants, that's not our thing. And I remember even then, a long time ago, saying, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Paying for college is such a huge part of going to college. How can we not be talking about the finances and the money? And that's sort of, even back then, something that was on my mind and what I decided needed to be the focus of our work as school counselors, despite many of us being more about listening and counseling and less about data and finances. So with that being said, I've worked in very different school districts. So I worked in Framingham when I started, and then I became the Director of Guidance, Testing, and Academic Support for the Malden Public Schools, where about 70% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. We would say that it was probably closer to 90. Just it wasn't always registered, it wasn't always on the books. We had a lot of undocumented students who wouldn't file. And then 3 years ago, I moved to Lexington, where 20% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. Interesting note, Malden High School and Lexington High School are the two most diverse high schools in Massachusetts. So with that comes a lot of different experience, a lot of different backgrounds. So One of the things that I do is I oversee the comprehensive school counseling curriculum in Malden and in Lexington, K to 12. So I oversee our comprehensive curriculum K to 12. So we do a lot of different things to make sure that not only are we responding to crisis, but we're also doing a lot of prevention work, which is actually my background. I graduated from Harvard's School of Education in Risk and Prevention for Children and Adolescents. So for me, school counseling really is about prevention. How do we prevent issues? How do we prevent crisis? So to me, paying for college is a bit of a crisis in terms of how do you do it? Whether I was in Malden or in Lexington, families really don't, no matter how much they make, how much they take in, they don't have $70,000 to pay for a year at BC. They just don't have it. I don't know if any of you have that in your banking and finance worlds, but most of the students and families I work with do not. So it really is about starting these conversations early and incorporating that into our counseling curriculum, as well as the conversations and connections and partnerships we have with different families, but also different organizations. When I oversee our parent workshops and our evening workshops, I do a little activity. I was thinking I would make you do it, but I'm not going to. But it's called Stand Up, Sit Down, and I always just do this in the beginning to get a read on the audience that I have. One of the questions that I ask is, stand up if you are wondering if higher education is worth the cost. And when I've asked that question in Malden, or whether I've asked that question in Lexington, a majority of the audience stands up. And then I ask the next question, are you worried about paying for college? And every single member of the audience, again, whether Malden or Lexington, stands up. And what I find is they're thinking about the affordability, but college selection and where you go to college is oftentimes not based in the money, it's based in the emotion. It's based in the, I really want my child to go to a school on US News and World Report's top 20 list, and I'm gonna get them there no matter what. And part of what my work is to really have students and families think about three things. And my staff always laughs at me because I love acronyms and things like that. But so it comes down to FAP for me. Is it there a fit? Is it affordable? And is it practical? Does it make sense? And so some of the things we do talk about the academic and social, but we also talk about the financial fit. We talk about the affordability, not just in the first year, but the second year, third year, fourth year. Are you saving? And are you applying for scholarships and all those things in between? But then there's the practical piece. And so I like to have conversations with students and families around things like community college, dual enrollment, apprenticeships. There are a lot of different paths to higher education, and making sure people are aware of those different options. And a lot of that comes down to the conversations that you have with people. Some of the best work that we do, and I encourage people in the audience, whether you have a book, whether you have a bank, what makes the biggest impact for students and families is the conversation and the connection and the human element of this work. And that families being able to speak with people who they trust to talk about these things. And that's a lot of what we do as school counselors and a lot of what I've learned. Fit, affordability, and practicality are individual conversations as well as big picture conversations. So it's sort of up to us to make sure that students and families have the information that they need so that they can make good decisions that have them on the path to being successful adults. So I'm going to stop there because I'm really more excited about questions of what's on people's minds in terms of making college affordable for students. So thanks.
Thanks, Virgil. Before we get to audience questions, I just had one burning question I wanted to ask of the panel, and that is, if you can read in the news, or financial literacy seems to be top of mind And people in higher ed or people in economic empowerment organizations, nonprofits, community-based organizations talk about this need to develop financial literacy. How does it get incorporated? I mean, K-12 is this impenetrable fortress with testing and evaluation, and we can't do it then. Or maybe let's try like after-school programs. Maybe let's try summer. Like, is it an issue that it needs to be like just implemented by the state? Does it need implemented by the federal government? Is it just not the nonprofit space partnering with the private sector? Like, in your opinion, how do you get the idea of financial literacy and the importance of this, more penetrated, and so it becomes an actuality instead of more just philosophical?
Well, I'm happy to start. So what I have seen in terms of the educational system and thinking about financial literacy, it is really important to embed the knowledge and the conversation within the school systems and with students, and because it's the day-to-day power of these conversations that make the biggest difference, not the one-shot deals. So if you're able to embed things like financial literacy, that's where it's going to have the most impact. In terms of how we do it, there are a lot of different approaches, and I really do think it involves partnerships between schools, between banks, between state government, federal government, and nonprofit organizations. No one institution can go it alone. It really involves a lot of different people coming together. Some of the things that I have seen have the most power are like in 8th grade with our students, we utilize MassSys, and they do reality check. So that's a way that students start thinking about how they're going to pay for things. What does it look like when you graduate from college and you need to rent an apartment and you want to go out to good dinners and you like going to the movies?
Can you describe what MassSys is, please?
Sure. So MassSys is basically a resource, an online resource that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education oversees that allows students to do a lot of different career exploration. They can do strengths and weakness analysis, they can research careers, they can take assessments. It comes with curriculum that counselors and teachers can use with kids. So it's a real holistic resource, and free, I might add, which is often really wonderful for school systems. So we've embedded that into our school counseling practice. So every 8th grader in Malden and in Lexington, because I've happened to be the boss in both of those places, goes through that. So it starts conversations about what is the reality of life after school. Some other things that have been very powerful for us in Malden, a partnership with Bunker Hill, dual enrollment. We're working on a partnership with Middlesex Community College in Lexington, and some of that is around like the practicality piece. How do you earn credits when you're still in high school so you can advance either your placement or the classes that you take? Some of the, again, best things we've done, we've had Kevin come and do presentations on the FAFSA where he breaks it down and makes it understandable for people, but then on top of that stays around for questions. And again, I think that's where the personal connection and the trust comes in. People need to have that, so.
So it's always great to hear the customer saying the things that the organization thinks are important. So this is our mission, right? K through 12 financial education. We think it works. So what's the problem, and how do you get it done? So part of the problem is that was gravity. Does not make me a physics teacher. Every person who thinks they've spent a half a second in banking or on Wall Street thinks they can go and teach. Teaching is a profession. My mom has 2 master's degrees in education. I have an MBA from up the river here. I am not qualified to teach a bunch of little kids in the classroom. I'm a great role model, private sector going to not-for-profit. I'm not an educator. So we need to start by training the educators. I firmly believe that. That's what drew me to this organization when I came 6 years ago. We have to have teachers that understand and guidance counselors that understand. Said it in your remarks. You were not trained in finance or financial aid. You were trained in other important counseling aspects, but and you're fortunately you understand these things. The second thing, and this is one of the things I loved about what you said, is it has to be embedded in the everyday. So we treat these subjects like regular old academic subjects. We have curriculum, our materials and lessons are developed by educators. If you go on our site, EconEdLink, and you're an educator, you'll say, oh wow, these look like real lessons. They are. They're developed by actual educators, people who teach at universities, people who are master teachers in the classroom. They have learning objectives. They're active hands-on learning. Some of them have little games online. It's a mix, just what great educators say. Not meaning to say they need. This is not meant to be a commercial, only a little bit. But you have to treat these subjects not as some one-off, as you said, but as a real subject. And it's super easy to embed these in the everyday life of the classroom. So we teach little kids about compound interest using jelly beans. During the day, they get to put jelly beans in when they do good things, and if they don't eat them, at the end of the day they can see, or the end of the week, how compound interest works. That's a powerful message for a second and third grader, because when they get to be older and they're thinking about savings, they're gonna think about jelly beans, it's gonna stick. Think about all the important stuff you learned in elementary school and how relevant it is today. Very. Children's literature. Most classrooms will read Aesop's fables, the grasshopper and the ant, not to mention the cliche. In our version, in our lesson, the ant has a bank account. So you can take the everyday things that you're doing and very easily integrate this. In fact, we aligned all of our materials. There's a little matching thing on our website, so if you're teaching a particular standard, in particular if you're a Common Core state, but it's linked to state standards in every state for math and ELA and social studies, you can go in and find one of our lessons that you can use to teach that standard, so it's not anything extra, but use personal finance and economics. And guess what? When you teach math using practical lessons, Learning Point Associates did a study, kids' math scores go up when they're taught using real life examples like personal finance. So it's all goodness. We just need to do it. And it needs to happen exactly the way you said, with not-for-profits, private sector, and the schools working together. Because we provide services for free, so we need the private sector folks to help. Sorry it was a bit of a commercial, but I'm very passionate about this.
But Nan, I think your passion is well-founded and shared. I'm not an expert in financial literacy, but I'm an observer. And so my observation is this. The White House did a study on financial literacy, and one of the striking conclusions in the report was that, as we heard here, most guidance counselors feel completely unprepared to talk about financial information with families or financial aid or anything to do with finances for college. And the one group that I didn't hear represented in the last two comments was just the parents, right? So I think that the reality is when you're talking about embedding it, trying to embed it at home. And so we have this big problem, and the problem is that those who are guidance counselors, according to these reports, and from we hear, don't want to talk or don't feel qualified to talk about that. So the idea of providing training for them so they feel more comfortable to talk about it at some level is really important. But then we go to the other spectrum of how do we teach the parents that they shouldn't be eating the jelly beans, right? That's really the point. And so it comes from both ends, and we are not experts, but I did work on Wall Street, which means I think I can say most things about anything, so I'll qualify this. We wrote in the book a little bit about financial literacy from the time a child's born right through 12th grade as a place saver to say that this is something that parents need to think about in conjunction with how they're thinking about college. And what the experts will tell you is that when you teach kids when they're young to make choices, that sets the stage for what they're going to do later on. So again, it can begin at home with all these great programs we're talking about, but the idea of this embedding and making this an innate part of a conversation, natural part of a conversation in a family household, just showing your kid how you use your ATM card or how you they pick all that up. So I think there's a wonderful comments that were made and support a lot of what we're trying to do with regard to advancing the discussion broadly.
Excellent.
The last comment I have to make is I really don't think it's a legislated, Washington-based answer.
Great.
Excellent. Sure.
So there were two important things that you mentioned. One of them was parents. Obviously, all of us have families. we did some family financial literacy nights this year in Rego Park in Queens, which is also an incredibly diverse neighborhood in New York City. And what was astonishing to me was, in speaking with some of the parents, some of them said they were literally afraid to talk about money with their kids. And we were doing K through 5. We did K3 one night and 4-5 the other night. And they said they were afraid to talk to their kids. And one mom said her son dragged her here, and I'm pleased to say it was a math night. We did math games. And she said, this is great because now it's forcing me to learn because I see how enthusiastic he is about understanding all of this stuff. So the schools can actually be a place, and I know you know this from your experience, where if you start bringing the parents into this, you start to have that broader conversation, and that's really what can make a difference later on in their lives.
Excellent.
Can I jump in and make
Sure.
a quick comment too?
Sure.
Because I think that point about parents, guardians having conversations with students is so important and so valid. On the school side, we have sort of put that in a direct, have you talked to your kids about how to pay for college? Kids, have you talked to your parents about how you're going to pay for college? Because it is almost shocking how little that part of the conversation happens. You know, I think so much is focused on how do I get in and where do I get in, and less about how are we going to pay for it when it happens, which is, again, I think where we're trying to start those conversations early. But our conversations are really about you need to have a conversation and talk about this. So.
Excellent. Now I think we're going to open up for questions. Brittany has the microphone. I think we have one right here.
So this concept of embedding, I think is super powerful, and I'm wondering if you have examples in your organizations or ideas around tactically tying, educating the whole household to the exercises. I think in the classroom, jelly beans are great, but what if the kid had to take something home that they were forced to ask their parents a question and create a dialogue? Are those kinds of things out there, or any data around whether or not that works as a pathway?
So our core financial literacy curriculum is called Financial Fitness for Life, and we actually have parent workbooks in English and in Spanish so that parents can do exercises with their kids. But you end up with the same challenge as already makes an assumption that you have an engaged parent, or a parent that feels not just engaged but confident and comfortable. So we've started integrating the parent piece into our program for Hispanic students and their family, but we were just chatting beforehand, and one of our initiatives for next year is to reach out and do this parent piece a little bit more fully. There's a woman named Beth Koblener who was on the President's Council for Financial Capability. She's about to release a new edition of one of her books for parents and talking to their kids about money. She's terrific. Good friend of ours. I don't know if it speaks to the parents that are going to be at a Cristo Rey High School. So with everything else, I think this is actually quite a segmented market. But that resource for parents, our workbooks for parents who have some knowledge and want to engage with their kids, are definitely good places to start.
Great.
So again, representing the school system in K-12 education, I have the luxury of sitting in meetings with math department heads, social studies department heads, English department heads. So we get to have a lot of conversations about curriculum and content in each of those areas. So some of it, I think, is advocacy from parents, from administrators, from educators, from nonprofits, to talk about how can you embed the financial literacy into these other content areas. We do the same with social emotional curriculum and content. How do you embed it into the fold of the school? So my math department head, Kevin Kelly, he's amazing, MIT graduate. He and I have a lot of conversations. Okay, well, what can we be doing in first, second, third grade? What can we be doing at the high school level to have a spin on financial literacy with some of the things that you're doing in the classroom? So I think some of it is philosophy and leaders in education recognizing that this is an important piece of a student's education, and then figuring out a way to have it come in. And I think it goes along the lines with those 21st century skills that we're trying to develop: collaboration, working in teams, communication, grit, persistence, sort of all those pieces. So you embed it the same way you would embed some of those.
Right, and we're talking about the knowledge economy and preparing for the knowledge economy. Well, forget about what the jobs are in the knowledge economy. No one hasn't been able to define those, but if we're stressing the knowledge economy, then we can stress financial literacy as an important component of that knowledge we're trying to develop, and I think that's what you're getting at. Excellent. In the back?
Hi, good morning, and my name is Chris Robbins, and I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Financial Aid at UMass Lowell. So, woohoo! Thanks for the shout out. I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing through the K through 12 on financial literacy, because I can tell you I've been financial aid 14 years, and I've done verification, I've done student employment, I've done loans, I've done counseling for the past 8 years. Now I'm running programs, and we're starting a financial literacy program right at the university to help. Because what I have found with my 8 years of counseling, and a lot of the things we're talking about here at this summit, and sometimes I think a lot of this stuff is symptoms, and that the real cause is when I would sit with parents for the 18 years, not only the parents and the children, people don't know how to handle money. They don't have a clue. So when they come and they would sit with me, and I would say, well, what was your plan? No one had a plan. Or the plan was that they would get financial aid, and that would be it. And they'd be ready to go, and that's a whole education process that we go through. So I really like hearing, because we talk a lot in the office about, like, we're doing peer-to-peer counseling with our students, trying to get them, up, because we want them to graduate, knowing more than when they came in. And we've always said that, this is great, and we like doing this. I love the work, too. I'm very passionate about it, too. But it'd be great if it started in the earlier grades, so by the time they come to us. And I do first-year seminars with our students, where I go in with money management skills and money management things. And I will ask students in the classroom how many have ever had a money management, and maybe one kid in the class will raise their hand. So I applaud you. Keep up the good work. Get it into the high schools. I think it'll help everything with what to borrow for loans, how to live like a student, how to do all of those. So thank you.
Thanks very much for your comment. Appreciate it. Back.
Could I just make one comment to what you just said? And that is that I'm really proud of the work that the universities are doing in this area of financial literacy for college students. We're being contacted by colleges across the country talking about just what you're talking about, peer-to-peer counseling. And what the value we're trying to add to that is this idea of leveraging the technology. So use the platform that we developed to actually deliver those services, because the great thing is that families will walk into college planning centers. I know there are college planning centers on locations, for instance, in Rhode Island. I can go to a shopping mall and walk in and get a college planning center. The question is, how many times do you see that student? How many times does the family actually come back? And what we're trying to do, and on our role trying to help solve this problem, is to provide an e-platform to say that not only do you come in and get this service and get the peer-to-peer counseling, which all the studies say work better than a baby boomer to a millennial. It doesn't work, right? So the question is, how do you leverage that experience and provide additional information at the convenient time for the person who wants to receive it? But the work that you're doing and the work the universities are doing and the institutional money that they've put up over the last 10 years is really impressive and will help solve this problem in the long run.
Hi, my name is Donna Harris. I'm from Michigan State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. And I know that you're talking about most people that I've met here are dealing with undergraduate, but in veterinary medicine, we have a 2-to-1 debt to salary ratio. So our students are graduating with $180,000+ in debt, and their starting salaries are $70,000 and don't go up much from that. So we just had a big Fix the Debt Summit in April at Michigan State. It was a profession-wise looking at our debt, which is unsustainable in our profession. And we're looking at financial literacy, but 2 statistics were shown to us, and I'm sorry I don't know where this came from, but I want your opinion. One was, even though we educators might provide financial literacy, students, adults, do not use it until they get in their early 40s, which by then veterinarians are in a crisis point. So I wanted your opinion on that. The other statistic was that the segment of population that is the most financial illiterate were affluent families. And I wanted your comment. Those came out of the same study, and I just wanted your comments on that.
So the Dr. Anna Maria Lusardi is at GW University. She's probably one of the preeminent, researchers in the field of financial literacy, entire life cycle. So she did a study of young people a few years ago, which was a very important study in the field. And what it shows is not surprising to any of us who've been rolling around the business world for a long time. It showed that the rich white guys do better in financial literacy than women, people from poor families, diverse students, Hispanic, African American, and that's where the gaps are. So I'm a little confused about your second point. The first point is that there's an awful lot of controversy in the field about whether it makes sense to teach financial literacy or not, because they say it doesn't work. And the FINRA study last year, which showed the increase in credit scores and the decrease in student loan default rates, is really important. It was a really excellent study done by Carly Urban and some others at the University of Wisconsin, along with FINRA and the Federal Reserve. And I'm not just picking my data on this. It's really challenging to look at studies over time and see what works and what doesn't. Also, application is not necessarily a measure of knowledge. So how many of you are from New York? Anybody from New York here? Yeah. So if you're from New York or you root around there, you know that if you walk into Pret in the morning, that they have their nice chocolate croissants and they have 340 calories. Okay, now I'm over 50. It takes a really long time to burn that. But yesterday morning, I did 30 minutes of interval training, and I know how many calories that burns because I have a little Fitbit on. Got to work, have a little stress at home right now. My mom is sick. And I saw that chocolate croissant sitting there, right? Bad choice, but I ate it, right? So it's the same thing with financial capability. You can have the knowledge, and you can still make a bad choice. So I go back to the fact that we do not do well in math on the PISA exams, right? All the PISA exams. In the financial literacy universe, we're like between Russia and Latvia. It's not good. In math, we're ranked like 31st or 32nd. I mean, we've maybe gotten as high as 23. Nobody says, you know what? We're doing kind of poorly on the PISA exams in math. We're ranked so low in the world. Let's stop teaching math. No, we say math is important. We need more engineers. Kids need skills even to work in a coal mine today. You have to be able to work these machines. We should teach math better. So I think what the data says, instead of let's give up, I would interpret the data as saying we need to do a better job, figure out how to teach these like real subjects, and hope that even if you reach only one kid to make a better decision, then you have done your job as an educator or a not-for-profit exec or somebody else. Because we can't stop doing it just because we think it doesn't work. Otherwise, we should stop teaching math and we should stop teaching English, because the average scores in this country are really poor. It's embarrassing. It really is. Can I just tell one other little story about choice? I have a teacher, a third grade teacher in Mississippi in the Delta, not a happy place. So she told me that she uses these things called Dragon Dollars for her second graders. And they get Dragon Dollars when they do good things in the classroom, like their homework, or they behave in class. All of those basic skills that most of us in the room, maybe not all, probably grew up with, getting reinforced in our homes. And then the kids can use those Dragon Dollars to buy stuff in their classroom. If they want to use more than they have to pay interest. They have to pay back twice as many Dragon Dollars as they borrowed. Now, we're not going to report her to the SEC for usurious interest rates or anybody else, right? The ABA, right? They all heard this testimony. They were there. But you know what? It teaches those little teeny kids about how to make choices and control, and those things filter through, because what she told me is, I hope that one day these kids are going to make the choice to stay in school. And forget about going to college. You know that if they can get their high school degree, That is a huge difference for a lot of these kids. College is great, we know all the numbers, but man, if you can get those kids to choose to do their homework and choose to go to school because they see rewards come from that, that's huge. So we got to keep teaching this stuff just to keep those kids in school. I don't care if they figure out their financial aid application, get that high school degree.
Excellent. Do we have any? Oh, right here. Great.
Could you comment on what role you think colleges and universities can play in helping students and families make more affordable choices? I work with a lot of students and see enormous gaps between the total, the net price, gift aid, loans, and what is left for families to pay. And my sense is that part of the problem is that colleges are not always particularly transparent in terms of what it really is going to cost. And I'm wondering what you think about that, what you would think colleges and universities can do more in those lines.
Thank you. Transparency is the key and it's lacking. Right? So the big question, I think where the drum roll comes in, is in the financial aid award letter, and this was discussed somewhat yesterday. But to me, I didn't write this article, but Mark Kantrowitz, who many of you may know, and you read his name in the paper, he wrote an article about a year or two ago that said that the United States government is the largest predatory lender in the country. And if the CFPB would look at their lending practices in the student area, they had seen the same practices in the private sector, that they would close down those lenders. And why did he say that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that on many financial aid award letters, loans are packaged as aid. And in the book, and when I talk about this, I say when you get your financial aid award letter, you need to understand very clearly there are three kinds of aid. One is free money, which really is aid, grants and scholarships from the institutions generally. Two is work study. So in my book, that's earned aid. You have to go and earn that. And the third aid component are loans. And there's no disclosure on that form at all about what that means, other than the parent can get this plus loan to the full cost of attendance, no matter really what their credit score is, or any resemblance of their credit. So I think to your point, yes, it's not necessary. This transparency question can be taken up by the universities, and some have adopted the shopping sheet that the Department of Education's put out, which I think is a very clear step forward. But again, the schools, and you hit on the point here, this is a consumer transaction. The school's job is to assemble the class that can pay them the most money in net tuition revenue. And there's a lot of that goes into that. I understand that, but on a macro level, it's a business. So they're playing by a set of rules necessarily that is different than what you might expect. And so as a recipient of a financial aid award letter, I have this emotional reaction. They like me. They let me in, and they're going to give me money. Look at the aid package I just got. Well, maybe you just got a good aid package, or maybe you didn't. So I think, I said a lot there, and some of that's, probably you can argue all day long with me about whether or not you agree. But at the end of the day, I think the transparency around the aid award letter is something. And I don't believe that it's a big government solution to that. I think if you went in and you said to the families, what do you want to know about your aid award? And they say, I want to know how much free money I have, and then I want to know if I have to pay the rest of it back or if I ever earn it. Just tell me that. And again, I think the shopping sheet goes a long way to make that clarity. The question is, how do you get schools to adopt it, or something that is like it in concept?
So I totally agree with everything you said. The transparency piece on the higher education side is extremely important, because I've, over 16 years, looked at a lot of letters, and I still get confused when I look at letters now like I did 16 years ago. And I don't think it's me. I think higher education is a business in many ways, and the whole point is to get students to want to come to your school and to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. So things are packaged in a way that look great, even if underneath it isn't so fabulous. So being able to partner with higher education a little more to be able to make those things more transparent. And some colleges and universities are very transparent, and they do an excellent job. So it's about everybody sort of being able to be on the same page with that, and not use financial aid letters as a marketing tool. The second piece of that, I guess, I think, at least for me, on the public education K-12 side, I feel a real responsibility to help students and families be able to navigate letters and really understand what it is that they'll be paying at the end of the day. And again, we're able to do that with partnerships with the folks at MIFA. They do a great presentation. I've even had them willing to come and speak to students in assemblies, speak to parents at night, but not only that, but schedule appointments with students and families to review their letters that they get and break them down. And that's the stuff that on an individual level really makes a huge difference, is having experts who are willing to sit down and get you to the bottom line about what are you paying, and not only what are you paying this year, because freshman year you get a ton of money and you might not get that sophomore, junior, and senior year of college. So sort of understanding that piece too.
I think my friend from UMass Lowell wanted
yeah.
to comment.
I was just telling my partner here, I always try not to take this stuff personally when you start talking about what the colleges do and do not do. At UMass Lowell, we don't include the Parent Plus loan, and I totally agree with you on that. That should not be included on the federal, on the award letters. I think our award letters are pretty clear. As far as the loans are concerned, when I do presentations for MIFA. We do parent orientations through UMass Lowell that I do to kind of educate the parents on how to pay, et cetera. I guess part of it is I just want you to know there is good stuff happening out there. But secondly, when we talk about the aid, we talk about the gift aid, which is, like you said, are grants, scholarships. We talk about the self-help aid, which is work study. They have to learn that. And then we talk about the loans, and why the loans we consider financial aid and self-help aid. Unless there's someone in here who's a lender that can prove me wrong, those loans are in the student's name alone. So in a way, they help the parents. The parents aren't taking more loans. There's no credit check on those loans for the student. Your student gets a loan. There's no lender that I know of out there that will give your student a loan unless they have a cosigner. So your name has to be on it. So that's where the philosophy comes about the loans for the students, is that there's no credit check for the loans, and they're capped, especially from the federal government, like $5,500 for the first year, $65, $75, $75. So if a student is going through school, and they're only going to take the federal loans, they're coming out with a debt payment of $27,000, which people buy cars for more than that. And it's about a $300 a month payment. So I just don't want, some schools out there, maybe they aren't as transparent with the financial aid award letters, but I can tell you there are a lot of schools out there. We work very hard to make sure that it is transparent, because we know this is a big decision for students to make. And when students come to talk to us, we bring this into, the play, but truthfully, sometimes people don't want to hear. They're in their head where they're going to go, and we do try our best. But I just wanted to clarify that loan thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to sit down now.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll wrap up our panel discussion today. I want to thank all of our panelists for a very robust discussion. Thank you.